welcome back to the channel for another Phil1Up podcast. This is the third podcast in this series, and I'm so excited to have Mongunzoo with us. How are you doing tonight, sir?
Hey, I'm doing good. I'm lucky number 3, huh?
Yeah. I know we were talking and I wanted to get you on here, and I've been meaning to get you on here sooner, but then you went on for vacation and then I got sick with strep throat and it just kind of delayed it. And then I wanted to do it today and then it got pushed to later tonight.
Yeah, we've been playing a little bit of tag, haven't we?
Yeah, we've been playing a little bit of tag, but we're here and we're ready to go, and we're going to talk about pretty much all kinds of cool stuff. Some Zelda, some Nintendo.
Those two are often on the horizon anymore, aren't they?
yeah, everybody's about Zelda right now. But to start this off, why don't you introduce yourself, tell everybody who you are if they're not familiar, and then just go into detail about what you do, what kind of content you make, and whatnot.
Yeah, certainly. So I'm Mongunzoo. I used to write for a website called Playing with Superpower. SNES Hub as a writer for that website. This is probably over a decade ago. Back when I used to play Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis primarily, and the Nintendo Wii a little bit. Actually wasn't involved in console gaming for, I skipped the N64 largely, I skipped the GameCube entirely, and I skipped the Wii U. So all those generations were essentially skipped by me. And then I got back into gaming hot and heavy with the Switch. And I figured to myself, hey, there's this internet thing, so why don't I go ahead and take a stab at writing up some of my experiences? Since I've got over 300 games for the damn thing, might as well share some of my perspectives. So I run a website called Flipping the Switch that details and chronicles that, kind of as a good kick in the ass for me for my backlog, trying to get that under control. It's never going to happen, but I tell myself it's going to happen. So I write for that on Substack, and then I've also got a YouTube channel as I do I don't know if you can call it content. I guess it's content. I talk over screen caps of screenshots I took on my Switch games, and I old man ramble about the experience. So,
hey, everybody loves a good old man ramble. I've had my versions of old man rambles, but usually it's just somebody in their inbox, and it's like a massive paragraph, and they're like,
sure.
Please stop sending me a novelization. And I'm like, I can't help it. This is just how I'm talking, which is why it's good that I do podcasts, because if you know Jay of Cold Nights,
long format,
my big lovable buddy, we will get on phone calls and I will just talk his damn ear off and he'll talk my ear off. And we're just one of those, we're those type of people that just like to talk. That's just how we are.
I've been told I'm a talker too. So yeah, I think between the two of us, I think we can get something magical going here.
yeah, for sure. I have to say, where are you from? Because you have that accent and it kind of sounds southern. So I'm curious.
Interesting. It's a little bit that you pick up on that. Definitely can tell that's a customer service tell that you can pick up on that. So I'm actually live in Central Illinois, but I was born in Columbus, Georgia, and spent some early years there. And so a little bit of that Southern comes out, but not quite enough to where a majority of people think it's like a non-regional diction, and there's just something they can't quite tell, and that's it.
Yeah, I was thinking it was probably Georgia. It's probably Georgia or Tennessee or something like that, because I'm in the southern part
just
too.
A little bit.
Sometimes it slips out and you can hear it a little bit. So let's change some gears, and what have you really been playing of late? Have you only been playing Switch? Have you been playing some retro? What have you been diving into?
So if I'm not on Morrowind or Ultima on PC, I'm pretty much exclusively a Nintendo Switch gamer. Lately, went on vacation, and on the grueling 18-hour drive, when I wasn't driving, I was playing Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. So I got that finished on the drive. That game's not a very long finish. And was also able to do a little bit of Yoshi's Crafted World and get that finished, because that was another short experience. And then the indie game Dredge, which low key is a front runner for my game of the year right now. So I've got all 3 of those done and in the docket. And Metroid Prime Remastered I had finished just before vacation. So I've got 4 games, well 5 because Pocky and Rocky Reshrine. So there's 5 games that I've got a review in me to write. I've just got to stop being so damn lazy and get the outline turned into an actual damn review.
Man, I feel you when it comes to like being lazy. It's like I got to put out content. I got to put out content. I'm gonna be honest. When I was sick and I really didn't have the energy to put out content, that's when I was like, I don't want to be on Twitter and check notifications, and I don't want to make content. And I was like, this is nice. So I was like, I'm gonna start taking that approach. I'm gonna do it whenever I feel like it, and if it's not consistent enough, then I'm sorry, people.
You should do it that way.
You just gotta be in the feeling of wanting to do it, because if you push yourself to do content, it's not gonna work. It's gonna feel forced. It's gonna be boring. It's not gonna have your.
And full disclosure, I don't push myself to do content. In fact, it'll happen when it happens. I don't even know how to look at my analytics on YouTube, to be honest. Like, I'm doing it, and if people want to come along for the ride, that's fine. And if not, hey, that's cool too. I'm sure most people have more things to do than to listen to an old man ramble over screenshots. So.
Honestly, I was getting to the point where I was stressing over analytics and caring about that stuff and getting bombed because I would put so much energy into thumbnails and put so much energy into editing. And I always get these comments, even just got some the other day, like, your editing skills are really awesome. Like, that is so good. How did you do that? And I literally do it all from my phone, people, with like 3 or 4 apps. One is InShot, there's CapCut, there's Canva, and I think there's like PicArts or something like that. And those are the ones that I use to do all of my stuff. But because it's on the phone, it takes so damn long, and my phone will hang up and it will freeze and it will slow, and then it'll kind of like shut down. I have to like reboot the thing and do it again. But that's how I do my stuff. And it can be kind of demoralizing when you look at somebody else's channel. It's literally like they rolled out of bed, they didn't even brush their hair, and they just took a selfie and put it up, and that was their thumbnail, or they really didn't do anything with the video, they didn't edit anything. It's just, and then they got so many subscribers. But I don't really want to get caught up in that anymore, and I don't care about the algorithm, because I feel like a lot of those big content creators, they're slaves to their algorithm. You'll watch their channel and they'll only make this one type of content because they know that's what's going to bring them views and subscribers and money. So they feel inclined to keep doing that. But after a while, that has got to get boring. That has got to get depressing, to be stuck only doing this. Because if they try to change it up, the algorithm is going to bury their content. Their thumbnails look exactly the same. Their content looks exactly the same. It's all the same. And I just can't do that. I got to skip.
No, I'm with you. And let's compare processes, I guess. With the exception of the get lots of subscribers, I'm pretty much a lot of those YouTubers that roll out of bed. Basically, what I do is I wake up, and if I have a review on the queue, in other words, I've already written it for my Substack because that's the primary vehicle for me. What I will do is I will do what's called a one-take review. And Phil, when I say a one-take review, I mean it. It's a one-take review. I turn the thing on, I do it, and if there's too many and then I will reset. And if it comes out good, then what I will do is I will post it with screen caps, and that's it. It is a one-take review. There's no lie in what I'm saying. Now, the only difference is those guys roll out of bed, wake up, do exactly that kind of content, and they get thousands and thousands of subscribers. I get tens of subscribers to varying amounts, but it's fun for me, and that's what matters. I have a job. I don't need an income from YouTube.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the best way to go about it. If you're trying, because at this point in the game with YouTube and content creator, TikTok, Instagram, this and that,
it's already a red ocean.
Yeah, it's already a massive ocean. You had to be there from the get-go. You are not going to become a massive star. Like, you just aren't. But then again,
I
my
wouldn't want to
niece,
be.
who's like 18, 19, she's got like 7.5K followers on TikTok. And I'm like, how?
It can happen. It can happen, but it's a lot of it. I'm not going to discount skill, because I'm sure good editing and good content, I'm sure all that comes into play. And then you just have to
And
be in the
being
right place
fairly
at the right time.
fairly attractive helps. But she was telling me, like,
Well, I like my blue Switch footprint, but I don't know if it's going to win the attraction game.
she was telling me, because we built a Lego set together, Optimus Prime, on my channel. It was a while back. You can find the video in there.
Sure.
But she really got into building Legos, and she loved the way that NES Lego set looks. I still want to get it for me, but she just made a TikTok video talking about how she wanted it, and some follower of hers just bought it for her. And I was like, you got like a $270 Lego set sent to you for free from a follower? She's like, yup. I was like, can you ask them to send you a PS5 for me? Because I'm not pretty enough to get one for free. I mean, I could show my man boobs, but I'm probably not going to get anything. I'm probably going to get blocked.
Yeah, Truffle Shuffle will probably get people screaming that they need an adult more than anything else. No, I know the feeling. I know the feeling.
But I'm curious. You said you were on an 18-hour drive. Where on earth did you go for a vacation, if you don't mind sharing with us?
We drove from Central Illinois to Florida. Wow. All the way to go to the beach. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say it's 18 hours. At least it felt like 18 hours.
Oh, man. Well, good thing you had the Switch on the go. I'd probably have a power bank, unless you had like a car charger, because I know the Switch's battery life really isn't too good.
Right. Yeah, I had not good enough for that, for sure. We did have a car charger that worked for the cell phone to show us where we were going. But when we went to plug the Switch in, and this is funny because I bought it at GameStop for $9.99 the day of, and you know where this is going. You already know where this is going. I love it. So we plug it in. It works for the cell phone that we're using. Doesn't work for the Nintendo Switch. Doesn't charge it at all. So I had to laugh. But the good news is I was playing two very, very low battery, not intensive games. I was playing Captain Toad and I was playing Yoshi's Crafted World. So that battery lasted a good 9 hours or so with those games.
Wow.
It lasted about half the trip, but I was driving for a decent chunk of the other. We were switching off and on. So there wasn't a lot of time twiddling thumbs or sleeping. There was a lot of good Switch gameplay that I got to have. Now, naturally, your mileage varies. If you're playing Doom 2016 or Doom Eternal on that thing, yeah, or Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is why I didn't play those. Yeah, that battery's gone in 5 tops. 4, probably.
For sure. Now, do you have like the whole, like a Switch OLED? Do you have like original Switch? Do you have a Switch Lite? Do you only have like one Switch, or do you have multiple?
So I got an OLED. I upgraded to the OLED and then gave my regular Switch to my dad. So I just have an OLED, but love it because I primarily play in portable mode anyway. That's my preferred method because I usually have a television with YouTube or Netflix or something going on in the background while I play games a lot of times, unless it's a very, very immersive game, and then I might just focus entirely on that. But most of the time there's going to be a television running. It's just I prefer to have that noise around me, that static.
So you said that you're really focused on the Switch, but before that you had like a lot of retro games. Do you have a big collection of retro games? If so, how many do you have? What is probably your most significant?
Super Nintendo by far. My early days writing for Super SNES Hub, and prior to that website being founded by Masamune, he's like, hey, there's a Sega 16 website that does a lot of Sega stuff and has a lot of great Sega reviews, but there's no effort like that for Super Nintendo, despite the fact that it was an immensely popular system. And so at that time, SNES Hub was born. PlayingWithSuperPower.com is what it's called. It's a hoot too. A lot of our old forum discussions are there, and those were a riot. We had fun on those. And a lot of my early reviews are still there. And I came to that website basically from the perspective around, oh gosh, it had to be the early 2009, 2010. Don't quote me on that. You have to go back and look at the actual timestamps of the reviews, but this is at that time I had just recently gotten back into gaming with the Nintendo Wii. There was an entire time period between the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis and the Nintendo Wii where I largely ceased to be a console gamer. I would only play games on occasion on the PC.
Wow. So what was it about the Switch that really brought you back?
Switch had everything that I was wanting. Switch had started first and foremost, had a very strong traditional style Zelda, the open world Zelda that I had not seen since A Link to the Past, Zelda 2, Zelda 1. So that right off the bat got me. Normally, before I buy a system, I have a rule that I broke for the Switch. I need 3 games that are out currently that I want, and I need 3 games that are coming out that I want. And I mean badly want. So Zelda Breath of the Wild was enough for me, with the understanding that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was coming, which actually had a real frickin' battle mode that wasn't on the Wii U game. They literally made battle mode on the actual track instead of having the big open arena for battle mode. One of the most nonsensical decisions I've ever seen, but par for the course for Nintendo during the Wii U era.
Yeah. Sure.
So you had that game coming out. But it really had all 3 of the pillars I talk about that are important for a game console. The first foremost being absolutely stellar first-party output. The Nintendo Switch is home to some of the best entries on just about every single Nintendo first-party series, barring Ice Climbers, which the bastards will never make the Ice Climbers game that I've been pitching for 20 years.
Or give us Mother 3.
Or Mother 3, or Nintendogs. You know, we need that back.
Nintendogs. You had to say that. Jay's gonna watch.
Had to say that.
He's gonna be like,
had to say it.
Nintendogs.
Nintendogs. But so we had the stellar first party support, and you had Nintendo actually giving a shit about their first party experiences again, which is fantastic. You had the indie game scene. This is an absolute indie machine, and you can get them all physical, and you know that working for premium edition games how important physical is in terms of games preservation. And I'm a very and also it had the cartridges. Cartridges are infinitely more collectible than discs or Blu-rays to me. I love the little cart. And then finally, you have the third-party support, the curated third-party support. And I want to emphasize that third-party games only matter when they're good, and they only matter when they sell. The box is just a box you buy to get to a video game. And so you don't need to have everything that the third parties throw out, because most of what the third parties throw out, quite frankly, is garbage. But it is good to curate the good games from across time. Maybe not all of the good games from this generation, because there's some the Switch just can't handle, and that's understandable. But I'm talking about a curation, especially someone like me who is a lapsed gamer who missed entire console generations. All these are new games to me. When I play a game like Darksiders, or when I play a game like, say, Persona 4, should it ever come physical, never got to play those games. So those are brand new games to me. And the amount of quality that Nintendo has curated from these third-party collections that they ported over because they see money on the table is just incredible. So it's that combination of having stellar curated third-party support, including the classic games. Like Sega Genesis Classics Collection is a great example of this. That is one cart that has 50 of the Sega Genesis best games on it. And it's done, and it's emulated absolutely wonderfully. So you've got the classic and third-party support, you've got stellar first-party output from Nintendo, and you've got the burgeoning indie game scene that this is literally the home to. And so all 3 of those things, it was like lightning in a bottle for me. I had to get on board. I haven't felt this kind of magic since the SNES or NES era.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite impressive, because I remember when the Switch launched, people were like, "Oh, it's gonna be the Wii U. It's gonna be the Wii U. It's gonna flop like the Wii U," and it didn't. It didn't flop.
It didn't. Of course it didn't. I wish I'd had money to throw at it again.
I kind of went hard on the PS4. There's probably like 400 or 500 games on the shelf, and probably there's more over here and over here. There's tons of stuff everywhere. I need to chronolog it all in my app and
right
to make sure I have what I have. But it's just so many games, it's hard to want to do it, and there's just more stuff coming all the time. I've kind of took a little bit of a break of really buying games, and now I'm kind of in the
Right.
gears of collecting action figures right now, because after the last podcast with
I
Scorpio
heard that. That was a
Caesar,
great video.
yeah, it was really cool. It was really cool. And we had a good time just opening figures and showing them off and getting excited. And I want to kind of do more of that. Um,
Sure.
More podcasts like that, because that'd be kind of fun to do, like do unboxing. So hey, I got a new game. And the upside to that is I don't have to make a designated video just for it, because I use the podcast to show it off. So it's like, yay, that's one less thing I have to do now.
Absolutely. Work smarter, not harder.
Yes. Work smarter, not harder. So I want to switch gears now, because I know you really want to talk about Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. But let's keep in mind, I have not played either of these. The last time I played a Zelda game all the way through to start to finish was Twilight Princess on the Wii. Totally don't recommend playing that on the Wii. I swear, I got carpal tunnel using a Wiimote and a nunchuck trying to play that. It was such a pain in the ass. But
Phil, that was an agonizing game to play on the GameCube. I can only imagine with motion controls, that fucking tutorial, 3 hours. Oh my
gosh. Yeah, like
Oh, never again.
my hand was like a claw. I felt like the claw from, what wasn't his name? The claw from Inspector Gadget. Yeah, that's what I felt like. I felt like I had a claw after doing that.
Yeah,
but I got through it.
Yeah, you feel like Dr. Claw, or you feel like the guy with the little claw hand from Scary Movie 2.
Yeah.
Like just your hand just absolutely just destroyed by that game.
But I absolutely love that game. My favorite Zelda games is Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. My favorite Link is Toon Link. I know that game got so much backlash on the GameCube, like this isn't the art style it should be, and blah blah blah. And now everybody loves it, and I'm like, y'all some assholes. Y'all flip-flopping assholes.
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you on that. Not that Wind Waker is the worst game in the series by far, but Wind Waker was never my favorite game, and it's not one I typically like. That said, the art style blow up over that's I have a theory as to what caused that. I don't think the art style at all, because as we've seen, that art style has held up magically. That art style held up better than say Twilight Princess.
I think most games should have been cell shaded. Like go back on the PS2 and play Dark Cloud 2, play was it Rogue Galaxy or Rogue? Yeah, I think it's Rogue Galaxy. Those games look gorgeous. And then the Dragon Ball fighting games, those anime fighting games on the PS2, the cell shading looks great. Like it ages so well.
Sure. So my theory on this is that, when you go to the doctor because like your side hurts, and the reason you go to a doctor is because you don't know what the hell's wrong with you.
Yeah.
So you're going to a doctor's appointment to find out what's wrong with you, to try to get a diagnosis. All you're doing is yelling and screaming, saying my side hurts. That's what was going on with the Zelda Wind Waker art style. They were taking the thing that was the most visible indication that something had changed, and they were yelling at that. It's not that they personally hated the art style. I don't think anybody disliked that art style. When I looked at that back in the day, I'm like, that art style's fine. That's the least thing that's wrong with Wind Waker. But I have other issues with Wind Waker that go far beyond art style. But before we get into that, let me preface this discussion. You say Wind Waker is one of your favorites. What was your first Zelda game?
Honestly, I played a little bit of the older ones. Like I played the NES one. I played Zelda 2. I think I played a little bit.
You say a little bit though.
Yeah, like a little bit of Link's Awakening. Not too much.
Was it A Link to the Past?
Yeah, I think it was Link to the Past.
It's
hard to remember because I know I didn't really get to experience a bunch of games. It's mostly like back then it was Mario Brothers and whatnot.
Sure.
But
so what I will say is I want to preface what I'm about to say. Please take no personal offense to this, because what happened is if you started with Wind Waker and that was your primary Zelda experience, or if you started with Ocarina of Time, or you started with Majora's Mask, it's a perfectly fine opinion to have. There's about 4 to 6 million people tops if you adjust for population increase with macroeconomics, that love those games to death. I started with the original NES Legend of Zelda back in 1986. I started with Zelda 2. I started with A Link to the Past. And starting with Ocarina of Time, those games became absolutely obnoxious and unplayable to me. And the reason for that is because we went from a game that, one, was a completely, or as time goes on, it gets less, but largely a completely open world. Even in A Link to the Past, you can't do the dungeons out of order except for certain sequence breaks, but you can still go anywhere you want, to a very, very curated experience. So it didn't feel, starting with Ocarina of Time, it didn't feel like I was going on an adventure in a large open world. It felt to me like I was taking on a tour. Like, hey, thanks so much. Thanks for stopping into Zelda Land. Thanks for stopping into Hyrule Gift Shop. Make sure you hit it on the way out. You know, that's kind of what it was. You're going to go here to the Great Bay Temple. You're going to go to the Goron Temple. You're going to go to the Kokiri Forest, grab the Master Sword, do this temple, this temple, this temple, this temple, this temple, go to beat Ganon. Make sure you get the gift shop on the way out. Thanks for stopping by Hyrule Land. Now, starting with that game, the games all kind of took that approach, which is, and more became these puzzle chore time dungeons that didn't revolve around me being a hero and my decisions, but instead was revolving around the ridiculous, feckless citizens of Hyrule with their ridiculous appearance, wanting me to do their chores. In Skyward Sword, I think a lady actually asked me to clean her house during the tutorial. And I'm just sitting there, just shaking my head. And then you got like, what is it? Red pompadour. You got white lip gloss. You got snotwad. Not a great character trait when I can identify you by your ridiculous, weird characteristic. You're not Sergio Leone. You're not making an Italian Western. You're making a Zelda game. I've just got all kinds of beefs with it that go well beyond the art style. It's much more fundamental than that. But I can see how someone who grew up with those and played those, perfectly acceptable to like those games. But I come from another world. I come from the land beyond time, before the N64 and the PlayStation. And it just did not do it for me. So that's what I mean when I say Breath of the Wild was this magical breath of fresh air. It's like, I'm back. Oh my gosh, I'm back here. I'm back in open Hyrule. I'm back in a dangerous world. I'm back in a world that has already fallen to evil. Evil is present in the world. I can ignore all of these ridiculous nonsense shit that these citizens want me to go do, and I can focus on being a hero. I can go kill Ganon right off the bat if I want to. I couldn't even do that in the original Zelda game. There's some old man that yells at you to get the hell out of here until you get the Triforce. It took that original NES Zelda formula and it evolved it into a flawed masterpiece, but it's one that I'm hoping Tears of the Kingdom will build on. Haven't played much of it yet, but I think I've old man rambled on long enough. I told you I'd do
it. Well, that's perfectly fine. I think we'll have to talk more about that after the short break, and we'll come back with Mongunzoo and we'll talk more about Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom.
Hey, this is Mongunzoo with Flipping the Switch, and I want to tell you a little bit about what the purpose of this channel is. So first and foremost, I'm absolutely a Switch fanboy. I do like Nintendo's current approach, and I'm pretty negative on a lot of what's going on with most of the games industry right now, and I don't make any bones about that. Now, with that said, historically, I'm not a Nintendo fanboy, as I've had a lot of beef with their business approaches at times and how they've treated many of their properties. Second thing I want you to know is I buy all of my own games, almost without exception. So there's no sponsored content, no free game codes from publishers, no ads, no monetization. No matter how tiny this stays or no matter how big this gets, I have never accepted this and I never will. So, okay, so tell me a little bit about why you like Wind Waker.
So I really like Wind Waker. For one, I mean, I gotta be honest, I love the art style. I just, something about that whimsical, cute, toon looking, and you're just a kid running around. And from what I gathered after I'd played the game years ago, that he's not actually, correct me if I'm wrong because I haven't really dived deep in Zelda lore, he's not actually one of the real Links or the chosen Links or something like that, I guess. I don't know if that's true. Like,
that timeline devolves into nonsense very quickly.
Yeah.
So here's how I handle it, and tell me this isn't a superior solution to whatever the hell Nintendo settled with. What I do is, because of the mythological nature of Zelda, Zelda is a knight in Celtic Wonderland. That's literally the job the game does. And because it draws from mythology, everything from Jason and the Argonauts to the Golden Fleece, to Sword of the Stone to Sleeping Beauty, various games draw from mythologies from all over the world. And so, what better way to handle that story, convoluted nonsense shit that Nintendo settled on, than to just say, hey, every single game is a new oral retelling of the same legendary story, because stories change over time. As time goes on, stories get passed on, and every storyteller puts their own spins on things. So it's the same exact events, but it's a different variation of that same legend being told. That's kind of how I deal with it, and that sidesteps a lot of that. So in this particular case, sure, is Toon Link going to be the real Zelda? Yeah, in that particular story, yeah, absolutely is.
Huh. I never thought of it that way. That's kind of interesting. But I really love the art style. I loved how animated the characters were, how silly they were, but just something about being a boy setting off on this grand journey and taking out on
On an
this
adventure.
boat and going on to the ocean and the water. And I just thought the world was so massive and so big, and you could just go to these islands and do these puzzles. And I will admit, probably my most hated thing about that game was controlling the boat at certain points,
So
trying
slow.
to get it to go the right way, the wind.
Yeah, you were kind of, your adventure was kind of hobbled by the boat, but that's a lot of why I can't dislike Wind Waker as much as I dislike some of them. Is it does have that stab at the open world. Maybe the GameCube couldn't handle generating that much land, and so they went with the ocean.
Yeah.
And I also like the story, the flooding of Hyrule. That's great mythological storytelling and set piecing. And the portrayal of Ganon in that game is being this world weary, just tired at this point. He's just tired of it all. And it's the only time I've ever seen Ganon get character development. Usually Ganon is this just macho, arrogant guy. It's like, why are you so arrogant? Every time we meet, and you should remember this, you're the same guy apparently. Every time we meet, I shove you in a locker, dude. Like, I don't know why you're so arrogant and confident. You lose every freaking time. But the Ganon in Wind Waker acknowledges that, and he's tired of it, and he just wants the cycle to be over. And so, there's things to admire, certainly, for Wind Waker. Absolutely. I would agree with that.
Yeah, so that's why I liked it, but I really loved Twilight Princess, just the art style, how there was another princess. It wasn't just Zelda, because honestly, my princess is Minda. I can't ever say her name
Midna.
right.
Yeah, Midna's cool.
But I love her. And then when you see her in the true form at the end, I just fell in love with her. She is so beautiful. I love her. I absolutely love her. I adore her. And I was like,
and you're not
can I have a game where it's just like me and her again on another adventure? Can she just, for me, I'm like, can she just replace Zelda for me? Can we have like the Legend of Minda now? Like, let's have a Twilight Princess 2, 3, 4, 5, because that's how I am. I love her. And I love Wolf Link. I love the fact that you get to turn into a wolf, and like it's such a nice dynamic and a big contrast from what we've seen before. And I love going between these two different realms. I thought it was really awesome and really creative and interesting to be both. And then I when I saw that you could actually take Wolf Link with you through the whole Breath of the Wild journey. I don't know if you could still bring him into Twilight Princess. I haven't heard anybody say anything about that. But I was like, okay, this is cool. I get to hang out with my little Wolf Link buddy, and we get to run around and kick ass together. Sign me up. That's enough for me. It would have been great if you could actually have Minda there with you too. But beggars can't be choosers. But one thing I want to talk about.
Minda was definitely the least of the least irritating of the Clippies, of the Zelda Clippies, that little paper clip that says, "Hi, can I help you with something?"
Yeah.
To me, she intervened the least. So yeah, and also a cool character.
Yeah, her design was just amazing. I love the design of the Twilight Realm and how everything looked different, and it was just cool. But I wanted to go back to something you said earlier about how you wanted Zelda to have a return to form, that open world thing where it wasn't like limiting you and halting your progress and where you can go and what you do, because the old Zeldas, you could literally go, in the first one you can go where you wanted or whatnot. It's so interesting you say that, because I've heard a lot of people's complaints with Breath of the Wild, and I don't know if it's the same with Tears of the Kingdom, was the fact that there just was no real dungeons. There weren't really anything elaborate with the puzzles, and it all integrate and work together. Because I know in the non-open-ish Zelda games like Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time, the attention to detail in the puzzles and the dungeons were really impressive. There was a lot of things that you could do inside those dungeons, but once you completed the dungeon, you did all the stuff there, it was pretty much gone, over with, no reason to go back, and you just continue on. But when you were there, like, the dungeons were just wow. And a lot of people's issues that I heard with Breath of the Wild is there was no dungeons like that. There were no dungeons tied to a boss and a unique tool, and it all made sense. It just felt like, here's this thing to distract you for 5 seconds. So it's interesting to see that perspective, because it's like that's people's problems with the open world thing, but then your problem with the non-open world thing is that it wasn't open world. But then it's like both those different kind of Zelda games have strong things that the other one is lacking, and it's like, just take them both and put them together and make the greatest Zelda game ever made. So I don't know if Tears of the Kingdom does
complicated.
That,
yeah, it's more complicated than it sounds. And my understanding is that Tears actually failed at that. It tried to do that a little bit, and it failed at that particular goal. In terms of having the actual dungeons that people want, the actual solid dungeons. It's a more complicated problem than anybody wants to admit, because what we're down to, Phil, is two clashing ideologies as to what a Zelda game is. Okay? Yeah. That's basically the problem the series has had from the start. Now, the only thing whether you like one Zelda or whether you like another Zelda is going to be completely up to basically when you were born, what games you experienced first, your proclivities for gameplay, and largely just which format you like the most. However, the only thing I will say is the sales clearly point us in one direction, being a more successful direction. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of defining what the original job of Zelda, I define this as Miyamoto Zelda, although this, with Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, these two distinctions have lost their purpose. Now we're going to have to try it. I'm going to have to find another definition. But prior to Breath of the Wild, you could clearly delineate Zelda between two camps. You could define it as the Miyamoto era and the Onuma era. Okay. So what was the Miyamoto era of Legend of Zelda? So there's actually a Nintendo Power newsletter, a Nintendo fan club newsletter, that in 1986 defined The Legend of Zelda as being the best of both worlds and defined it as an action RPG. That was the definition of Zelda in 1986. It was, and what they meant by best of both worlds was this was a console game. At the time, you had arcade games and you had PC games. PC games were very large open experiences, but were very complex and lacked a lot of tactile gameplay a lot of times, because there was a lot of input command, user commands. Arcade games weren't that big of an experience. They were often short, and they were very, very focused and hyper-focused experiences, but they had that tactile gameplay that you could feel in your bones as you played it. The definition of The Legend of Zelda, as defined by the Miyamoto direction, is that it's the best of both worlds. It is the large open experience of a computer RPG combined with the tactile experience and combat of an arcade game. Okay. So by using this definition, I have 5 concepts that a Miyamoto game runs along. Point number 1, it's exploring and interacting with an open world or an overworld. Concept number 2, getting stronger and more adept at operating within the rules of that world, and that this progression has to matter. Number 3, draws from dark fantasy and mythology. And rule number 4 is that the further the games stray away from this concept, the less people will be interested in the games. So essentially what you have is you've got the original Legend of Zelda game, which was defined by Miyamoto's experience of traveling throughout Japan and exploring the forests and the caves of his youth. And around A Link to the Past, another man joined the team by the name of Eiji Aonuma. And I don't want to paint him as our villain, because he's not. He's clearly not. But he was hired, and this is a guy who couldn't even beat the Octoroks in the original Legend of Zelda. He's admitted to that in interviews. He's like, I couldn't beat the Octoroks on the first screen. So he says something to the tune, and I actually have the exact quote here somewhere. Let me get my Zelda research doc opened up.
You got a document for Zelda
research?
I
got a doc for Zelda. Yeah. So
wow,
we want to go to on Aonuma style. My first encounter with Zelda occurred in 1988, shortly after I joined Nintendo. After studying design in college, I began to work designing pixel characters. At the time, I didn't have much experience playing games, and I was particularly bad at playing games that required quick reflexes. So immediately after starting to play the original Zelda, I failed to read the movements of the Octorok in the field, and my game suddenly came to an end. Even after getting used to the controls, each time the screen rolled to a new area, a new Octorok appeared, and I thought, am I going to have to fight these things forever? Eventually, I gave up getting any further in the game. As a result, I was under the impression that The Legend of Zelda was not a game that suited me. So what kind of games did suit me? Those would be text-based PC adventure games. For someone like me who enjoyed reading stories, these were games that allowed you to participate in the story and letting you experience the joy of seeing your own thoughts and actions affect the progression of the story. Plus, these games don't require fast reflexes and don't require traditional gaming skills. So I thought that if I were going to make games, I would make that type of game. Does it all make sense now?
Yeah.
Why Zelda took the turn that it... Yeah. So that's why Zelda took the turn. He joined in the Link to the Past team. And he did things like cutting grass, and he was a dungeon designer, pixel art designer. And then Ocarina of Time shows up, and he gets a little bit more. He's one of 4 directors for that game under Miyamoto. It's kind of the last Miyamoto era game was Ocarina of Time. And it's where you start to see things like that horrible water dungeon. It's where you start to see Aonuma's influence really kind of rear its head. Aonuma is not a tactile arcade guy. He doesn't come from arcade roots. He comes from PC point-and-click adventure game roots. The issue I have with this is that what he has done now is he has taken the best of both worlds definition that was given by Nintendo in 1986, and he's removed half of that definition. Now Zelda revolves around chores you do for the NPCs. It revolves around puzzles. You'll notice in my definition, there's no mention of puzzles whatsoever. In fact, the concept of the actual puzzle that most Zelda fans have didn't even originate until the very end of A Link to the Past with a couple of those dungeons, Ganon's Tower and Turtle Rock. Most puzzles as defined in, like, I guess sticking a sword in an enemy, I guess that's a puzzle. I guess pushing a block or shooting a switch, I guess that could be considered a puzzle. But for the most part, these large Rube Goldberg machines, these incredible machines that you do one thing and it creates another, and you solve the Rubik's Cube and it opens the door, that all came in Ocarina of Time largely. And that shows up post Eiji Aonuma. Now, there is a game that he worked on prior to The Legend of Zelda. It bombed in Japan, so it was a bomb. But it was a game called Marvelous Another Treasure Island. And if you play Marvelous Another Treasure Island, it operates just like A Link to the Past, except it has story and dialogue and puzzles and all the crap that Eiji Aonuma likes. Which, again, I like a lot of that stuff too, but not in my damn Zelda experience because I'm very old school when it comes to that. So why not just take this guy and let him make Marvelous Another Treasure Island? Let him make games like Okami. You know, I often point to Okami. You can always tell a successful game because of the Zelda clones. If a game is being cloned, and Miyamoto Zelda has tons of clones, where the hell are all the Aonuma Zelda clones? Okami is about the only one I can think of, and it bombed despite being a better Aonuma Zelda game than many Aonuma Zelda games. And so my whole beef with the series this whole time has been that it doesn't meet the original definitions of the Zelda. And so disinterest has started to set in. Sure, you get that 4 to 5 million people that love that style of Zelda, but when you account for the macroeconomic adjustments, population growth, the Iron Curtain, gamers getting older and getting more disposable income, competition, every single Zelda game, with the exception of Twilight Princess, is a decline from the original Zelda game, which, when accounting for macroeconomics, the original Legend of Zelda is the highest selling game in the series until Breath of the Wild. And even Twilight Princess only keeps pace with the macroeconomics. It doesn't really grow. So Zelda's been in trouble for a long time, is the point I make. And you can point directly to Anuma's style of Zelda games, and it's clashing with fan expectations, old school fans like me, as to why we haven't shown up for decades until a Breath of the Wild.
Well, it's so funny that that old article called Zelda a action RPG, because there has been an argument that people have had for the longest time that is Zelda an RPG, and there's like you don't level up and you don't get stronger in that sense. You only find like a new sword or whatever, and you get a bigger heart container, but you don't get HP. And then I want to ask you, do you think, at least for when it comes to like Breath of the Wild, Wind Waker, that kind of style, because you're always finding a weapon and you're putting it together and that stuff. Do you think the way Zelda is now, with the open world and all the enemies randomly spawning and whatnot, do you feel like it'd be better if you did have some kind of like level up progression? And I'm not meaning like you go out, you kill some trolls or whatever, and then you level yourself up to 99, you just go off and you hit Ganon, and he deflates and turns into like, oh, please don't hurt me, because you're so OP. But I mean, like, maybe, you know how in like farm sim games you have these certain skill traits that you can level up and it'll kind of like unlock a perk, like maybe you're out there and you're climbing as Link, so your stamina is going to get better because you leveled up that ability. You start jumping, so your jump is going to be better. You're riding on your horse, so your control on your horse and your ability to do more on your horse can, maybe you're sneaking and using stealth, so you get better stealth criticals, or you're farming and gathering materials, so maybe you have the chance to get rarer drops when you kill an enemy, and just like stat bonuses like that, and maybe like a perk tree where you can unlock more of those benefits. Do you think that would fit this new kind of Zelda, or I guess let's say this old kind of Zelda
old new?
Yeah, the old new.
Yeah, I think some of that's already present. You mentioned about the climbing and the horse system, things like that. So stamina is a big part of the game, unlocking stamina. Same with heart containers is growth. Your horse, the more time you spend with your horse, the more of an affinity you have with your horse, the better you are with that horse, and the better the horse controls, the faster the horse can go, things of that nature. Climbing, things of that nature are handled by equipment. So there are certain shrines that if you complete, you'll get something called the climbing gear, which speeds up that climbing remarkably if you get all three pieces. So it's already handled in a lot of ways. I think it could be expanded on, and I think this was the correct direction for Zelda to go in. Now, I haven't spent enough time with Tears of the Kingdom to know if it does. I do have some concerns with some of the things Tears of the Kingdom has done in terms of moving back toward that Rube Goldberg model. I do think that they've tried to open it up. There seem to be multiple ways to solve these puzzles because they're back. And they were back in Tears in Breath of the Wild as well. So that's what I mean by they tried to do some of that fusion. The shrines kind of operated as mini dungeons. The Great Beast tried to be a more traditional dungeon. I think they failed at that. I don't think they made either party happy. They certainly didn't make me happy having to deal with that nonsense crap in the Divine Beasts. And I don't think they made traditional the Anuma Zelda fans, I don't think they made those fans happy either, who wanted something like a forest temple, which I think is one of the standards for a good temple. They didn't do a forest temple or a spirit temple. That's what I tend to hear a lot about. So yeah, I don't think they made anybody happy there, but I think that the direction you just mentioned is very much the way forward for Nintendo if they want to continue to grow on this. Irregardless, just make it a dangerous world and let me loose. That's all I ask for.
Yeah, I think it would be kind of cool because I know people were complaining with the durability of the weapons that you would find in Breath of the Wild. I think it'd be cool if you could learn to smith, and because I know there's crafting and you can get better at the crafting, so like your weapons durability lasts longer, or your food heals you for more, and the buffs last longer because you cook more and you craft more and you build that up. Maybe you have to travel to these smiths around the land, and you learn the trades of
That's
smithing
very Zelda.
and the
That's all
cooking
very Zelda.
from them. And then you learn new recipes and things from. Maybe you can find hidden recipes scattered throughout the world, or weapon recipes scattered throughout the world. They could do stuff like that, and it would enrich it so much, because I love that. Like when I'm playing something like Neo 1 and 2, I get so ingrained in the crafting and making my armor and my weapons. I love that. I love to tinker with that stuff because it's so fun. And the more of that, the better. That's how you wrote me in, because that's a progression system. And maybe it's not leveling up and just getting more HP, but it's still a form of progression. And I feel like if they do that, like maybe if there's another Zelda in this series, I think that would be great to expand on.
And keep in mind that would also kind of help slow progression down. Progression has to matter. Keep in mind the second part of that definition, that you're progressing and growing in strength. Once I was afraid, but now I'm not. That's important to Zelda. And what that means is, the second part of that definition is it has to matter. Where Breath of the Wild falls apart is in the later game, because you're building for this encounter with Ganon. But what are you building towards? Because if you do everything, he's going to have half his health bar, and you're going to be so OP from all this progression that you are just going to literally stuff him in the locker like you do in every other game. Ganon needs to be harder, but more importantly, that progression perhaps needs to be slowed down. You want it to be, and it's a fine line, because you want the progression to feel visceral. You want the person to be able to feel that they're making progress, but that the game absolutely does fall apart once you reach that level where you've got the top end equipment, you've got lots of heart containers, you've got armor that you've upgraded to the point where you don't get hurt as much. Once that happens, the game does fall apart. It's something that it's a problem that needed to be fixed. Now, some of the things they've done with Tears of the Kingdom, with some of the enemies you find, I think definitely fix that difficulty. But my question, and I haven't answered this yet, is how long? Is it going to be 60 hours now before the game caps out and starts to fall apart? Or is it going to be a mere 20 like in Breath of the Wild? I don't know. Or will it be consistent throughout? And will it be a challenging experience throughout? I don't have the answer to that yet.
It's fun you bring up challenging, because I want to move on to this other part. When I was having my break from Twitter, Tears of the Kingdom came out, people were playing. I was sick, I wasn't paying attention, but I come back and I started to see this thing where like Elden Ring and Tears of the Kingdom were trending at the same time, and I'm like, what is going on? And I'm starting to see people compare the two. And this has got to be one of the most frustrating things I see with modern gamers today. Constantly comparing games to another game. And that's the basis of so many reviews. Like they automatically devalue a game by comparing it to another game, or they feel the need to put down a game to lift up another game they like. Like, why can't you just enjoy the game for what it is? And why don't you rate the game on its own merit? There is nothing similar about Tears of the Kingdom and Elden Ring other than they're open world and they have a horse you can ride. And
there's a few,
and you can pick up some materials. But the thing is, it's a discredit to both of those games. Like, both of them, and to constantly like, well, this game is better than Elden Ring, and Tears of the Kingdom is Elden Ring is better than Tears of the Kingdom. No, they're both great games in their own right. So judge them for what they are and not what they aren't, or who they don't appeal to, because there's so many games out in the world that none of us is going to live long enough to play them all, unless one of us finds the Fountain of Youth and we turn into a Twilight vampire and we look all pretty and sparkly and we live forever and we can play all these damn games in our big ass Castlevania castle. Unfortunately, that's not likely to happen. So we have so much little time on this earth and you should spend it doing what you want to do, what you love to do. So stop hating on games you don't like or don't appeal to you. Play the games that you do like and just base them on their own merits, not on some other game. I don't understand that.
Well, on our deathbed, we both know that we'll be wishing we argued more with strangers on Twitter. I guess my thoughts on this are that so it's the economist's question. So the reason I think reviewers ask it, and sometimes I do that as well, but there are good comparisons and bad comparisons. Okay. Yes. So it's the economist's question. I'm trained to ask that economist question, which is compared to what? That's what I always see these journos comparing. Oh, Ocarina of Time had the best sales in the series. Twilight Princess had the best sales in the series up until, and I sit there and I'm like, compared to what? You're comparing a game that came out in 2006 with Twilight Princess to a game that came out in 1986. That's a direct raw comparison, and it's useless.
Yeah.
So compared to what? So if you're going to compare sales, you would have to look at things like population growth. You would have to look at you have to make an adjustment for that. You would have to make an adjustment for the fact that nobody knew what the hell a Zelda was back then.
Exactly.
So literally, that game had to build itself. Yes.
There was nothing like the original Zelda on the NES. And besides, the freaking golden cartridge was the only one of its kind, and people saw that and they were immediately like,
the golden cartridge is important. Yeah, and the fact that Nintendo doesn't do that anymore is a monstrous missed opportunity.
Oh man, they should have made Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have a golden cartridge. That would
should have been a gold box and a gold cartridge. Absolutely.
Yep. That would have been great.
So the question is compared to what? And so that's a good example of this. So when I compare Breath of the Wild, to me it is acceptable to compare Breath of the Wild to its direct inspirations, and it is acceptable to compare it to its contemporary competition. So what I mean by that is you're going to compare Breath of the Wild to the NES Zelda because Breath of the Wild was built on that altered NES Legend of Zelda engine. That's how it started. So you can make comparisons using the NES Zelda. You can make comparisons to Tears of the Kingdom using Breath of the Wild. Perfectly acceptable. And you can also look at things like Ultima 7. You can look at things like Minecraft. You can even look at things, sure, like God of War or Elden Ring, from a very menial perspective. And what I mean by that is I was on a podcast with Cold Knights, and I told him that we're in a post-Elden Ring world. And I don't know how...
I remember that. I watched that. It was great conversation.
And I can't think of what they may bring to the table new, and it turns out we all were deceived. We were all deceived because we missed the boat. Nintendo wasn't looking at Elden Ring for inspiration. Nintendo was going for a far bigger score. They were going for Minecraft, the greatest gaming phenomenon of our time. That's what they were going for. And so Elden Ring, does it have a better combat system than Zelda? Yeah, Zelda honestly doesn't. People can do magical things with the Zelda combat engine. I am not one of those people. I think Elden Ring is a better combat game. I think that Tears of the Kingdom is a better open world game, I think is how I would sparse those two. And aside from that, and aside from acknowledging that they both share a similar architecture, that being from Ultima, both games share Ultima Underworld in particular. Ultima Underworld and Ultima 4 for The Legend of Zelda. Aside from sharing that basic architecture, they don't really have that much in common. I'm far more interested in comparing a sequel to its predecessor because that's how I can see how much better this game did forward.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. There's a lot of things that happen in the gaming community and these weird comparisons and it just really doesn't make any sense to me. And it just feels like it's something to get people stirred up or kind of clickbaity, or maybe it's like a negative PR, like it's bad, but it's good for me because now I got all these people commenting and being angry at me, but because they're angry at me, now I'm trending and I'm getting attention and people are still clicking on my stuff. And it's like, I don't really want to be a part of that. I just want to enjoy what I enjoy and people to enjoy what they enjoy and just love the game that you love.
Don't it's called a it's called a fandom because it's supposed to bring us together around what we love. It's not called a hate them. It's called a fandom.
Yeah.
So
that's what it feels like these days. I hate.
And there's discussions that can be had in Zelda, like you'll notice that, do I like every Legend of Zelda game? No, I think Skyward Sword is one of the worst things in the world. But you'll notice that we didn't talk about Skyward Sword today. Why would we?
I don't know. I've never even played it.
That's why we didn't talk about it. So we talked about the games we love.
And
we talk about Breath of the Wild. We talk about Wind Waker. We talk about the things we love.
Before we, I guess we wrap it up, is there anything that you want to say before we end this, or there's any other discussions you want to have before we go?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground here. I think it was a good time.
Well, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this podcast with Mongunzoo. Definitely check out his content, his articles that he writes. I'll get links from him and I'll provide them in the description so you can go check him out and support him. He's a great guy. I enjoyed this podcast. Hopefully we can get together again and talk more about Zelda and some other games. I'd like to pick your brain about the Zelda lore that I don't know anything about because I only played a few games.
Hey, but if you think I'm long-winded on Zelda, you ought to try me on the Mario series. Oh my goodness.
We'll have to do that sometime. But yeah, everybody, thanks so much for watching. If you aren't subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. That's how you join the 1UP family. And until next time, happy gaming. Let's all 1UP our collection together.
1UP.
All right. Bye.
Game over now.
Phil1Up collects. Subscribe to join the 1UP family today, and let's all 1UP our collections together. Happy gaming and collecting, everyone. See you real soon.